In all of us, there is a hunger.
The hunger marrow deep to know our heritage.
To know who we are and where we have come from.
Without this enriching knowledge, there is a hollow yearning. No matter what our attainments in life, there is still an emptiness and the most disquieting loneliness.
You will sense that something is missing.
We have a natural yearning to connect with our ancestors.
People seem drawn to their ancestry with more than just casual curiosity.
This is the turning of the hearts of the children to the fathers.
When our hearts turn to our ancestors, something changes inside us. We feel part of something greater than ourselves.
We feel a pull from our relatives who are waiting for us to find them so their ordinance work can be done.
Parents can relate stories of their lives to their posterity.
I, for one, am intrigued by their battles, their victories as well as their defeats.
One of my favorite family history stories is about my grandfather. Right before he went to World War II, he received a blessing, and the blessing in there stated that he would be protected if he followed the commandments. And while you're in the military, often lots of people want to party. And while they were out partying, he was on watch. As they were into battle and into war, some of that watch came back and actually hurt him in terms of hurting his feet. Any type of foot disease, it would be that, except much, much worse. And so he had to be taken into hospital bay. And because he was taken into hospital bay, he was not on the battlefield. So as his fellow comrades were coming in, he saw them and knew that he'd be one of those individuals if he was lucky, or even worse, as he felt prompted by the Spirit. So even though his feet had problems, and he had problems for his feet many years beyond the war, he was protected. And he was protected because of that blessing, because he kept the commandments, even though he had small amounts of struggles in keeping those commandments. They kept him from the worst dangers.
Each of us has a fascinating family history. It can be more fascinating than any movie you will see or any computer game you might play.
The ancestor that I found, who I'd like to talk about, is William Marshall. He's a really interesting guy, and I had no idea who he was. I just found his name scrolling back through generations. When I saw his name, he was around a couple other names that seemed familiar from history, and so I thought to myself, well, kind of a history nerd like that, so why don't I check it out? And his name said First Earl of Pembroke, so I thought that's promising, right? I actually just did a Google search, and I typed in William Marshall, First Earl of Pembroke, and tons of stuff came out. I found out there's a biography about him. How cool is that? There's 2 books of historical fiction written about him.
William Marshall, the most valiant knight who ever lived.
It was really, really cool. It made me feel like I had a bigger part in the world's historical narrative because I came from someone like that. It made me see good qualities of his that I would want to emulate and try to bring into my own life, things that I hope for myself. It made me see things that, maybe I don't want to be like that. There was just so much. Overall, I think it just gave me hope. It made me want to be a better person and kind of live up to this ideal that I have for my own ancestors.
Every human being who comes to this earth is the product of generations of parents.
It is deeply seated in your sense of who you are, but it has to do with more than just inherited DNA.
In many ways, each of us is the sum total of what our ancestors were. The virtues they had may be our virtues, their strengths our strengths.
This is my great-great-great-grandma, Annie. She lived in Maine, and her family were the only members of the church for many, many, many miles. She was called to be the Relief Society president. She had Relief Society by herself, in her kitchen because there were no other sisters to have Relief Society with. But she had such a strong testimony of Relief Society. She would serve her neighbors and her friends and her family. And she felt so strongly that that was the role of the Relief Society, was to take care of the people around her. How this great-great-great-grandma of mine affected me personally when I have learned about her is one day I was sitting in Relief Society and during a time that I was really struggling, and I was sitting by myself and I felt her sit down next to me and put her arm around me and whisper to me how much she loved Relief Society. And for many months after, she was my guardian angel, and I could feel her cheering me on when I was feeling down and telling me, you can do it, you can do it. And I really know that they're there. Our ancestors are all around us all the time. We don't always know they're there. We rarely know when they're there. But they're there, and they love us, and they're watching over us, and by learning more about them, we learn more about ourselves.
This is very spiritual work because we can expect help from the other side of the veil.
It deals with loving, caring, feeling ancestors beyond the veil.
Don't underestimate the influence of the deceased in assisting your efforts and the joy of ultimately meeting those you serve. The eternally significant blessing of uniting our own families is almost beyond comprehension.
I'd like to share a story about one of my ancestors, John Toon, one of the many Johns. And this goes back to my pioneer ancestry. There's a story about him crossing the plains. They're passing through hostile Native American territory, and they actually encountered some of these Native Americans, but they didn't panic. In fact, John pulled out his fiddle and played an LDS hymn for them, and they liked the music. The hymn that he chose was "Tell Me, Red Man, Where You Roam," and it's about the restoration of the gospel and sharing the gospel with Native Americans, because the Book of Mormon is a story about them. I thought that was an interesting story because not only does it show his love for music, but it also shows his love for the gospel and how he uses it to bless people and wherever he goes.
All of you have similar incidents in your families. Search them out, record them, live by them, and pass them on to your posterity.
Write personal and family histories.
Some people say, I don't have anything to record. Nothing spiritual happens to me. I say, start recording and spiritual things will happen. They are there all the time, but we become more sensitive to them as we write.
Family history story that I enjoy is my father's cousin, Johanne Wolfgram. When he was serving his mission with his wife on the Tongan Islands, his 3-year-old daughter got run over by a loaded taxi. Her head was crushed and her face terribly disfigured. They took her to the hospital, and the doctors said that all they could do was prepare her body for an honorable viewing. Johanne felt prompted to give a blessing. At this point, a number of curious onlookers had gathered around to see what was going to happen. And Johanne went to give the blessing, but felt constrained to do so. And after some time, the words came to him, and he said that now was not the time to give a blessing. It wasn't meant to be this public spectacle for people. They agreed, and the people left, and they carried their lifeless 3-year-old daughter home. 3 hours passed by. She started to show more signs of death. Then Johanne felt that the time was right. The words came to him. He gave the blessing, and then another hour passed, and she fully recovered. The 3-year-old that got run over, her name was Tisna, And Tisna went on to live a full and healthy life, and she actually compiled this family history book of ours. It's called Johanne Wolfgram, Man of Faith and Vision. She is the one that compiled it. She likewise led a fascinating life. These stories, they help remind me that the days of miracles have not ended, and the fact that there's that personal family connection there, it really motivates me to live worthily, to hold the Melchizedek priesthood. It motivates me to be a better person.
But what about you?
We can be inspired all day long about temple and family history experiences others have had, but we must do something to actually experience the joy ourselves.
No matter your situation, you can make family history a part of your life right now.
Start today.
I don't need to tell you the details of where to go and who to see. When you determine you are going to succeed, you will find a way.
Participate in family history and temple work.
Begin now. I promise you that the Lord will help you find a way. And it will make you feel wonderful.